This story is based on public court records and news reporting. All images are dramatized illustrations, not real footage or photographs of the people involved. In February of 2019, a healthy 38-year-old man collapsed on his own kitchen floor, and the people who loved him were told he would simply sleep it off. By the time anyone got him to a hospital, his blood sugar had crashed to a level doctors almost never see in a living person. He wasn't diabetic. There was no illness, no accident, no medical reason on earth for his body to do this. But his wife was a pharmacist. She had spent her career around medications, and she understood, better than almost anyone, exactly what insulin does to a body that doesn't need it. And the secret she was protecting had been built on money. Money taken from the people closest to them, including his own mother and father. This is the story of Natalie Cochran. Was her husband killed for what he knew, or for what he was about to find out? To everyone in Raleigh County, West Virginia, the Cochrans looked like the family that had figured it out. Natalie was a pharmacist. Smart, organized, ambitious, the kind of woman people trusted without a second thought. Michael was the warm one. Athletic, easygoing, devoted to his kids, a man who lit up the room and meant it. Together they built what looked like a dream. Nice homes, new cars, vacations the neighbors quietly envied. And there was one car in particular that mattered. A 1965 Shelby Cobra. The kind of car you don't buy on a pharmacist's salary. But nobody was asking how yet. Because in 2017, Natalie had launched a business that was about to change everything. A defense contracting company. It was called Tactical Solutions Group. The pitch was simple and irresistible. Government contracts, weapons, equipment, supplies, sold to the United States. The government, she explained, was slow to pay. So she needed investors to front the cash. And when Washington paid, everyone would share the profits. It sounded safe. It sounded patriotic. And it came from someone they had known and trusted their whole lives. One by one, friends and family wrote the checks. They had no way of knowing that the contracts she described had never existed at all. Because there were no government contracts, no bids, no deals, no weapons, no equipment, nothing. Tactical Solutions Group existed almost entirely on paper. The company was a stage set, and Natalie was the only one who knew it. What she was actually running was a Ponzi scheme. The oldest trick there is: rob Peter to pay Paul. New investors' money was used to pay fake profits to the older ones. Every happy payout was just bait for the next victim. And it worked. For a while. Around 11 people invested. Friends, relatives, people who loved this family. In total, investigators would later put the losses at around $2.5 million. One person alone lost more than $500,000. And here's the part that's hard to forgive. Some of that money came from Michael's own parents. She didn't just betray strangers. She sat across the dinner table from her marks. But the money didn't go into any business. It went into a lifestyle. 3 homes, jewelry, lavish vacations, and that Shelby Cobra. Investor money, parked in a garage, gleaming under a single bulb. But a Ponzi scheme is a clock with no stop button. It only survives as long as fresh money keeps coming in. By late 2018, the money was running thin. Investors were starting to ask harder questions. When exactly would the government pay? To keep the illusion alive, she took cash advances from finance companies. New holes dug to fill old ones. She even filed for bankruptcy, but left her investors off the list of people she owed, hiding them, hiding the companies. The walls were closing in. The scheme that funded her whole life was weeks, maybe days, from collapse. And then there was Michael, her husband, her supposed partner in all of it. The one person who could pull the whole thing down with a single question. But here's what the evidence would later suggest. and it complicates everything. The morning of February 6th, 2019, started as an ordinary day. The couple were supposed to travel for the business. A trip to Lynchburg, Virginia. Michael believed they were going to collect money he thought they were owed. He never made that trip. Sometime around 10 that morning, Michael collapsed in the kitchen. Now think about what most people do when their healthy partner crumples to the floor. They call 911. That is not what happened here. Instead, Natalie called 2 construction workers who worked for her. They came to the house and lifted Michael off the kitchen floor and onto the living room couch, and there he stayed, unconscious, for roughly 6 hours, while the woman who knew exactly what a crashing blood sugar looks like watched and waited. Friends started coming by, and what they saw alarmed them far more than it seemed to alarm his wife. One friend, Stephanie Hamilton, said Natalie told her Michael had a seizure and fell. Stephanie urged her, "He needs a hospital. He needs to be checked." Another friend was a state trooper, John Hamilton. He looked at Michael and thought the same thing. This man needs to be transported now. Natalie's answer never changed. He'll sleep it off. He'll sleep it off. Said about a man whose brain was, at that very moment, starving and beginning to swell. And there was one more detail from that day. One that would echo through the entire trial. A neighbor, Jennifer Davis, got a message from Natalie. She and Michael were sick, it said. She needed insulin. Natalie said the insulin helped with the effects of her cancer. So Jennifer's husband drove some over and handed it to her. Remember that. Finally, that evening, Michael was taken to the hospital. By then, it was catastrophically late. The doctors found a number that stopped them cold. His blood glucose was 21. In a healthy adult, that is barely compatible with life. An endocrinologist would later testify that a level that low in a man who wasn't diabetic pointed to one thing: a massive dose of insulin. But it was too late to undo. The hypoglycemia had triggered swelling in Michael's brain. Cerebral edema. He never recovered. On February 11th, 2019, surrounded by the wreckage of a life that was secretly built on lies, Michael Cochran died. He was 38 years old. And here is what makes insulin so terrifying as a weapon. Use enough of it, and it does its work. Then it vanishes. Insulin is something your own body makes. After death, it breaks down fast. Wait long enough, and there is often nothing left to find. The perfect poison for someone who understands chemistry. And Natalie understood chemistry for a living. So, when the medical examiner finally performed the first autopsy, about 7 months later, the body had decomposed. Dr. Piotr Kubicek could not pin down a cause. No clear injection site. No smoking gun. He ruled it. Simply undetermined. Undetermined. Which meant that, for now, the pharmacist with 2.5 million reasons to want her husband silent walked away free. But the questions did not go away. Because while Michael was dying, the financial house of cards finally fell. The FBI and state investigators started pulling on the threads of Tactical Solutions Group, and what they found wasn't a struggling business. It was a fiction. No contracts, no clients, just a river of investor money flowing into one family's lifestyle. Here's the detail that should have been a warning to everyone. 4 months after burying her husband, Natalie tried to sell half of the fake company for $4 million. She didn't slow down. She didn't grieve and retreat. She doubled down on the con, which tells you something about who investigators were dealing with. In 2020, she pleaded guilty to federal fraud and money laundering. The sentence, 135 months, more than 11 years in federal prison. She was ordered to repay around $2.5 million she would almost certainly never have. But the fraud case was only half the story. Because investigators had never let go of one nagging fact. The man who could have exposed all of this had died of a blood sugar crash that made no medical sense, in a house run by a pharmacist. They went back to Natalie, and when they did, her account of that morning kept shifting under their feet. First, she said she heard a thud and found him on the floor, a supplement bottle sitting out on the counter. Later, she said they'd been sitting together, that he fell and hit his head, and that she found the bottle in a cabinet. Small contradictions. But contradictions matter when a man is dead and you're the only adult who was in the room. So prosecutors made a decision. They charged Natalie Cochran with murder. But the first time, the case wasn't strong enough, and that charge was dropped. To bring it back, they needed proof, and the proof was in the ground. In 2020, Michael Cochran's body was exhumed. A second forensic pathologist, Dr. Paul Uribe, was brought in to do what the first autopsy couldn't. And here's the problem he faced. By now, years had passed. Just as expected, there was no insulin left in the body to measure. None. So Uribe did something different. He didn't look for the poison. He looked at what the poison had done, and then asked what else on earth could explain it. A non-diabetic man, blood sugar of 21, dangerously low potassium alongside it, a textbook fingerprint of insulin forced into a body that didn't need it. His conclusion, delivered from the witness stand, was unflinching. Quote, "The only reasonable conclusion I could make is that he was given insulin. People don't accidentally administer insulin to themselves." He admitted it was circumstantial. There was no video, no needle, no injection site. But in his words, all of the dots connect to homicide by poisoning. Then, prosecutors laid out the motive. Michael was the loose thread. If he ever truly understood what his wife had done, to friends, to relatives, to his own mother and father, the scheme and Natalie were finished. Dead men, after all, don't talk to investigators. But I promised you, this case complicates itself. And here is where it does. Investigators testified that Michael's own text messages suggested he didn't actually know it was a Ponzi scheme. He still thought the money was real. So was he killed for what he knew? Or for what he was about to find out? The prosecution argued she couldn't take the risk. The defense argued there was no motive at all. And then the defense did something almost no one saw coming. They called Natalie and Michael's own children to the stand to testify in defense of the mother accused of murdering their father. Their own daughter recalled the day her father collapsed. Both children testified about something specific, that Michael took large amounts of supplements and steroids, and that his health had been failing for months. It fed the defense's central theory. Michael, they argued, was a bodybuilder who may have injected insulin himself, a known and dangerous trick some athletes use to build muscle. They pointed to that supplement bottle in the kitchen. They reminded the jury the first autopsy said undetermined, and they hammered the obvious. The state had no direct proof of an injection at all. It was a real argument. Reasonable doubt is built from exactly these gaps. And through all of it, the jury kept waiting for one voice they never heard. Natalie Cochran did not testify in her own defense. The woman at the center of it all stayed silent. So it came down to this: a pathologist's logic against a grieving family's doubt. Cold chemistry against a bodybuilder's needle. The jury took it all and went behind closed doors. After a trial that ran nearly 2 weeks, after dueling experts and the testimony of her own children, the jury was gone for less than 2 hours. Less than 2 hours to decide. They came back into that Raleigh County courtroom on January 29th, 2025. Guilty. First-degree murder. The lesser options, manslaughter, they didn't even fill in. They left them blank. In West Virginia, a first-degree murder jury gets one more terrible decision. Mercy, with a chance at parole someday. Or no mercy, life with no way out. They didn't need long for that one either. The next day, they returned their recommendation. No mercy. Judge H.L. Kirkpatrick sentenced Natalie Cochran to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was ordered straight to prison that evening. No goodbyes. No more performances. Afterward, prosecutor Tom Truman put it plainly. Quote, "I am so happy that this jury saw through her and saw through what she is. I do believe this is justice served." But justice, here, is a strange and heavy word. Because look at the full ledger of what this betrayal cost. Natalie was already serving more than 11 years in federal prison for the fraud. Now, a state sentence of life without parole sits on top of it. The investors, the friends, the relatives who believed in her, were left with almost nothing. A restitution order on paper against a woman who will die behind bars. Among them, Michael's own mother. She had trusted her son's wife with her savings and lost nearly all of it. Then she lost her son. And then she sat in a courtroom and watched the woman responsible for both. And then there are the children. The same children who took the stand to defend their mother. Now left without either parent. Think about the impossible position they were put in. Asked to believe their father injected himself, so they wouldn't have to believe their mother poisoned him. There is no version of that they win. Michael's death did leave one mark beyond the verdict. In 2025, West Virginia lawmakers introduced a bill in his name, the Michael Brandon Cochran Act. A small permanent reminder that a real man lived and trusted the wrong person and did not have to die the way he did. It's not much, but it's his name and not hers on the law. Natalie Cochran has never publicly confessed. To this day, she is not admitted to giving her husband a single drop of insulin. So let's go back to the question this whole story turns on. Was Michael Cochran killed for what he knew, or for what he was about to learn? The jury didn't need certainty about his suspicions. They only needed to believe the chemistry, and they did. Because strip away the Ponzi scheme, the Shelby Cobra, the fake contracts, and the $2.5 million lies, and what's left is brutally simple. A man collapsed on his kitchen floor. The one person who could have saved him with a single phone call decided he should sleep it off instead. And she had the knowledge, the motive, and 6 unhurried hours to make sure he never woke up to ask her why. The people we trust with our money can ruin us. The people we trust with our lives can do so much worse. Michael Cochran married a woman who knew exactly how to make a death look like a mystery. He never imagined the perfect poison was sitting in his own home, in the hands of someone he loved. These are always the hardest stories. Not the strangers in the dark, the ones at our own kitchen table, the ones we trust. If this story held you, you already know why this channel exists. Subscribe and stay with us. Every fact in this story came from public court records and reporting. The images were illustrations. The betrayal was real. Take care of each other and be careful who you trust.